I am giving baby a bottle right now just to keep him calm. We are exclusively breastfeeding, but I like to collect milk in my haka just to give him a bottle here and there to give me a little bit of a break so I can get things done. Sorry guys, I'm a bit of a hot mess right now. I decided to film this video sitting here at my chair just so I could nurse baby and make it a little bit easier to try to film this birth story. Hopefully it ends up making sense and I'm not all over the place. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Esperanza. I am a full-time blogger and content creator living in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just gave birth to my son, Sage Wilder. He is going to be 3 weeks tomorrow actually, which is crazy. Time is flying. So in today's video, I wanted to share my birth story, a lot of which wasn't included in my birth vlog because I wasn't able to film the entire time that I was in labor. So I thought I would just share my birth story, just kind of like a story time about my birth story, giving birth to baby boy. So I do want to start off by saying that I know that there are plenty of people who have had much more traumatic birth stories than mine. I got a comment saying that my birth vlog was the least traumatic on YouTube, which is definitely annoying because for me, it was very traumatic. I just want to say I am aware that I am very blessed to have had the birth that I did and that things could have been way worse. And obviously the most important thing is that baby and I are here and we're healthy and we're safe. But I still wanted to share my birth vlog and my birth story for people who are just interested in what it is like giving birth at a hospital sometimes. Things definitely don't always go the way that you think that they are going to, which was definitely the case for me. So I also want to just mention, for those of you who have not been following along with my story, baby boy is just staring at me, that unfortunately my partner and I, the father of my baby, we had to split over halfway through my pregnancy. So I was about 6 months pregnant and we had to part ways. My partner had struggled with mental health issues, but unfortunately things came to like a really big head at that point in my pregnancy, which was not something that I had foreseen or expected. And so basically we had to part ways. Since then, he has gone and gotten help, which was kind of something that I was wanting him to do. So I'm very thankful for that. So that made the last half of my pregnancy very stressful. I was very depressed. It was very traumatic and I was very heartbroken the whole time. So the rest of my pregnancy was already very hard. And the week of baby's due date was extremely stressful, just worrying about my partner and also just like some drama that was kind of going on with our families. So I was very, very stressed going into the week of baby boy's due date. And I think because of that, I was not able to go into labor naturally because I really didn't have enough like oxytocin, which is necessary for going into labor naturally. And so because of that, at 41 weeks pregnant, I hadn't been dilated at all at any of my previous appointments. I wasn't really having strong contractions or anything like that. Actually, I didn't think I was having contractions at all at the time. So because of that, my doctors really wanted to induce me before I got to 42 weeks pregnant. I was very scared to do that. I kind of wanted to wait and go into my 42nd week of pregnancy, but ultimately I kind of was, got a little bit scared into doing the induction. They were able to schedule it 2 days after my last appointment, which was a day before I was supposed to have an ultrasound where we could have checked to see if everything was fine with my placenta and the baby at the time. But I was just kind of rushed and scared into it because I was told that there wouldn't be another induction date available until well past my 42nd week of pregnancy, and they just kept stressing how dangerous that was. So I ended up going to the hospital for an induction at 10 p.m. on Sunday, the 28th. So basically we checked in, my mom and I, at 10, and then it wasn't until 1 a.m. that I was fully checked in my room and given the first drug that they wanted to give me to induce labor, which was called Cervidil. So basically it's kind of like, it's almost like a tampon with the drug on it that they insert down there, and I was supposed to sleep with that in all night, but at some point early in the morning it actually fell out. So a little later the next morning they reinserted it, but pretty much as soon as that went in, I started to feel much stronger contractions. And I think when we'd gotten checked in, the nurse had realized that I was having contractions, but they were just very faint, not strong at all. So every time I'd gone into the doctors, whenever they'd asked if I was having contractions, I always said that I didn't know, and what I described as the feeling, they never would identify as contractions, because I kind of thought it was just gas, or like, I don't know, it didn't feel, I couldn't tell that it was a contraction basically, and they weren't very strong at all. So once I was given that Cervidil, it did make my contractions much stronger, and obviously I was starting to feel more pain at that point, but it was very manageable. It wasn't very painful or anything, and I wasn't dilated at all. So the next day, I think when they checked in the morning, I still wasn't dilated. So it was a little later that morning that they inserted the Cervidil again, and I was supposed to have that in until 4 p.m. that day. And I forgot to mention that actually the first night that I'd gotten there, when they had first put the Cervidil in, within like an hour, a SWAT team of nurses came in, like 5 nurses came in, because baby boy's heart rate was dropping, which could have been because of the Cervidil drug, but it also could have been because they had put a Bluetooth monitoring device on my belly, and pretty much as soon as they did that, baby boy was moving around like crazy. He did not like it, and I should have realized a Bluetooth monitoring device was not a good idea, but I was worried because I was hooked up to all these monitors for them to monitor mine and baby's heart rate, and I had to get up to go to the bathroom constantly. So I just thought, this is going to be such a pain having to take these off every time I go to the bathroom. They're going to run in here to see what's going on if I take too long. So I just thought, okay, the Bluetooth monitoring one will be more convenient, but that did not go so well. So I had to be hooked up to an IV and given an oxygen mask to try to get baby's heart rate back. So that was kind of scary, but at that point I wasn't really too worried yet. And then, like I said, the next day, later that morning, they tried the Cervidil again. So they wanted the Cervidil in until 4 p.m. when I would be checked for dilation again, although they checked for dilation a few other times that day, I believe. But basically I was doing movements on my pregnancy ball, and my nurse for the day had me do different positions on a peanut ball. And my contractions were definitely starting to get much stronger, but unfortunately they were too close together already, and baby's heartbeat dropped again. So I was given this shot to basically slow down the contractions. I didn't even know what the shot was, and they didn't really ask if I wanted it or not. They basically just gave it to me, or maybe they did ask me, but they kind of just like made it seem like it was an emergency and we had to do it. So I wasn't really suspecting like anything too much at that point. I wasn't yet too worried. I was still kind of hoping and just trying to be as positive as possible for having a vaginal birth, basically. But I had to be hooked up with the IV and the oxygen again and all of that. And then I believe when the doctor finally came to check me at 4, I was dilated to 1 centimeter, which was basically enough for her to try inserting a Foley bulb instead of doing Cytotec, because she was afraid that the Cytotec would, the next drug basically that they wanted to try to induce labor, that baby boy would react badly to it since he wasn't reacting well to the Cervidil. So we were able to get the Foley bulb in, and I was supposed to sleep with that in all night. So that night I was starting to get into a lot more pain. So I hadn't gotten any sleep the night before. I was still expecting to be able to give a vaginal birth at this point, and I wanted to be able to get some sleep. So I hadn't had anything for the pain up until that point going into the second night. But finally I decided I better have something, because I'm going to need to get some sleep if I'm going to have any strength to push baby out the next day. So I was given a dose of fentanyl, and it was just a low dose, and it really wasn't very strong, so it didn't help me fall asleep. So a little later that night I actually had another stronger dose of fentanyl, and I was able to get a little bit better sleep, but not that great of sleep. And the fentanyl definitely didn't work as well as I was hoping that it would. Going into the next day, my contractions were definitely much stronger. The Foley bulb had fallen out very early that morning, and when my OBGYN checked me the next morning, I had dilated finally to 4 to 5 centimeters, which was enough for her to basically start Pitocin, and still thinking that we'd be doing a natural labor. So the Pitocin, I get confused on how to pronounce that, that definitely made my contractions much, much stronger. And throughout the day, they became basically almost on top of each other, very painful. So I finally decided that I better have the epidural. My doctor had basically told me that it was kind of like a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing, that if baby's heartbeat had gone under 3 times, that we would just decide to do a C-section, that we would have to do a C-section basically. So because I was in a lot of pain, I decided to do the epidural, especially because my doctor said that we would need that anyway if we did end up going into a C-section, and it would just make things a lot easier to already have that done and out of the way in case of going into an emergency C-section. So we did the epidural. And also, so this was kind of starting to become the early afternoon, I think, by the time we did the epidural. And my new nurse for that day, I actually really, really loved her. She was great. She was having me do all kinds of different positions on a peanut ball to get baby's head turn, because at that point, since I was dilated to 4 to 5 centimeters, my doctor was able to feel baby boy's head. She was able to tell me that he had a lot of hair on his head, and also that basically his head was not turned the right direction. He was being pushed down there a little too quickly because of the contractions that were on top of each other, and he wasn't being engaged in my pelvis properly at that point. But I think they thought that we could get him turned around if I just did a bunch of these different positions. So I had my epidural in, and even though I had the epidural, I was able to do pretty much all of the positions, on all fours with the peanut ball and all that kind of thing. And I think that was because I had done a ton of prepping. I tried to be like as prepared for labor as possible. So I was going on like 3-mile walks a day. I was doing like pregnancy Pilates, the mile circuit movements and things like that. So I had a lot of strength built up from that. So I really didn't need much help from the nurse, which she was very impressed by. But because we were doing so many different positions, at some point the epidural had gotten dislodged. So basically, when they first did the epidural, I definitely felt like immediate relief. And then out throughout the day, as we were doing these different positions and movements, I kept telling my nurse and doctor that I didn't think that the epidural was working anymore. And I've been saying that for a few hours, but I don't think they were really listening, or at least I think they just thought, oh, you know, it's wearing off or whatever. But I was in so much pain, and they basically realized that it must have gotten dislodged when I was doing all those different movements, because this other anesthesiologist that was on call at the time came in, and this was going into the evening. He tried to give me something to relieve my pain, because basically at this point I was literally writhing around like someone from The Exorcist, basically. Like, I was in so much pain. I also had a ton of pressure, like this really horrible pressure feeling down there in my vagina, and then also in my like anal canal butthole area. Sorry guys, this is like probably TMI, but I was feeling so much pressure in those areas, and basically that was because he was there. He was like fully engaged in my pelvis, but his head was in the wrong position. It was tilted down, and because it was tilted down, his face was basically scraping all the nerves in my lower back, scraping the nerves in my anus, I guess. So that was why I was feeling so much pressure and so much pain. My contractions were on top of each other. The epidural was not working at all at this point because it had gotten dislodged. So the anesthesiologist tried giving me some other drug. He didn't even say what it was, so I have no clue. And that didn't do anything. So he came back to check on me later, and they decided, let's go ahead and do another epidural. And so he inserted a new epidural in a different spot. And shortly after that, I did feel relief from the pain. But shortly after that, baby's heartbeat had gone under again. And this was probably it might have been like the 4th or 5th time at this point, even though it was like a 3 strikes you're out kind of a thing. I don't know, but we ended up going past the 3 strikes. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is kind of an important thing too, was that when she checked me for dilation after the Foley bulb and I was 4 to 5 centimeters dilated, she also realized that my water had broken and it was tinted green. So at some point, baby boy had gotten stressed out and had gone poop inside of me. So that was meconium. So I don't know why exactly, but they kind of let him float around in that pretty much all day, because that was earlier, like maybe late morning, when she had discovered that. So one of the movements that my nurse had me do was called like shaking the trees, and I was on all 4s, and she like shook my hips, and so much like liquid came out, and it was all green tinted. It was so gross. And I always remember being told that it was really important to get baby out right away when there was meconium. So I don't know why they didn't. I guess it's because they still thought I was going to be able to, I guess, give birth vaginally at that point. And it wasn't until later on, I guess, in the day that we realized that his head was engaged there in my pelvis, but it was in the wrong position. So after that second epidural, baby boy's heart rate dropped again. And this time it was actually very scary because like the SWAT team of nurses came in again, like 4 to 6 nurses. And they had me on all 4s. But after that second epidural, I had pretty much no control over my body. I had like no strength. Probably comboed with the drug that the anesthesiologist had given me previously before the second epidural. So it could have been that drug, or it could have been the epidural that baby was reacting to, because he hadn't reacted badly the first time that he gave me the epidural. So it makes me think maybe it was a combo of those drugs. But it also could have just been that at this point I was in so much pain and I was not able to manage it. Like the breathing practices, techniques that I had like learned, everything that I'd researched before going into labor, to prepare for labor, things to do during labor, all of that pretty much went out the window at that point. And so because of that, I was in a lot of stress, I was in a lot of pain, and it could have just been that baby boy was reacting to that. So anyway, that was very scary at that point. That was when I actually became fearful, because like I said, this was the 5th time that his heart rate had gone under, and I pretty much knew at this point that we would be doing a C-section. And so my doctor came in after that, surely enough, and basically she said that baby boy's head was engaged in the wrong direction, like with his head pointing down, face pointing down. And because of that, it would be very hard to deliver him vaginally that way. It would be very painful, I think dangerous as well. And my pelvis was also not big enough for him. It wasn't opening up fast enough. Basically, I think that's pretty common when you're inducing labor, because your pelvis is supposed to open up naturally if you're having like natural contractions and all those things. But when they give you these labor inducing drugs to bring on contractions, they are very strong, very painful, and they're a lot of the times on top of each other. They're like out of control. Not like natural contractions where you have like a reprieve for a few minutes in between. So it was just like out of control on top of each other. And just so many complications arrive when you're going in for an induction, which I knew beforehand. And like I said, it was just unfortunate. Like everything was going wrong this entire time, basically. So going to the hospital for an induction, I knew I had fears about it, but I was trying to be basically as positive as possible. And at some point during these 3 days of labor, one of my doctors, because I actually ended up seeing 2 of my different doctors from my OBGYNs, they basically had you see like a different doctor every appointment, so that whoever was there able to give you birth, you would at least have met them like a few times before. So I had 2 different doctors while I was there for my OBGYN office, and one of them actually asked me, I think on like the 2nd day, she asked me how everything was going with my partner, like whatever had happened with that, because when I first got here to Phoenix, I was very concerned about all the stress that I was experiencing with that unfortunate split from my partner of 10 years. And I was afraid that the stress was going to be affecting baby. So I had told her about that, and she never brought it up again anytime I'd seen her after, which actually was multiple times. But for some reason, she decided to bring it up then on my 2nd day of labor, like early that day. And once she brought that up, it was pretty much all I could think about. It kind of caught me off guard. And of course I just answered saying like, oh, you know, he actually finally ended up getting help. And so that gives me a lot of peace of mind going into labor and everything, which at the time it had. And I actually did get to talk to him before going into labor. But after she brought that up, it was like kind of all I could think about. So I just all of a sudden became like so much more fearful of what was going to happen. I was honestly worried that I was going to end up losing baby. And so there was just so many emotions like surfacing at that point. And I also basically, the doctor said, okay, we're gonna have to do a C-section now. Like, there's no way around this, because he's not gonna be able to fit through your pelvis. It's going to be like a risky situation. So we'll do a C-section. You already have that epidural in, so we're gonna prep you for everything else that needs to happen to go and do a C-section. And so I basically just had to accept that that was what was going to happen. And I was definitely scared about it because I have been scared of pregnancy my entire life, scared of labor, and especially scared of having a C-section. But at that point, there was no other options, basically. And so at this point, that fifth time that baby's heartbeat dropped, I actually did start crying. Like, I had really kind of kept all my emotions under control at that point, but at that point it was just too much for me. Knowing that I was going into a C-section, I tried to kind of get back into like a positive mode at that point, but I also was on quite a lot of drugs at that point. I did have to wait a few hours, and that pressure down there was very painful. They had given me that shot again to stop contractions for a second time. So anyway, finally they brought me to the room for a C-section. For the few hours I was waiting going into the C-section, I was not allowed to drink any water. I also hadn't eaten pretty much anything that day except for breakfast, because you're not supposed to. So one of my mom friends, she had told me that they were gonna not let you eat, but that you would need your energy. So to try to eat something, I did have a few crackers, and my mom went and got me like a bone broth soup. And that was pretty much it. And so for the last like a couple of hours before the C-section, I couldn't drink any water. All I could have was like a cup with like this little sponge thing to kind of like wet my mouth a bit. So my lips were so chapped, my throat was so parched, I was so out of it, on drugs at this point, no energy, so hungry. And basically it was midnight when I was getting prepped for the C-section. And the anesthesiologist in the C-section delivery room gave me more drugs, and I was actually very freaked out because they were kind of like, you know, can you feel this? Can you feel this? And I was like, yeah, I can feel that. And they were like, oh, okay, well, you're supposed to be able to feel it, but it's supposed to feel more like pressure, but you shouldn't be feeling any pain. So, and just so you guys know, like, I am not good with pain. I am not good with needles. I am not good with any of this stuff. So when they were performing the C-section, I could literally feel them like cutting open, shifting around, just so, it was very uncomfortable and very disturbing for me. And to me, it was painful, because I could just tell what was going on, and it was just like a very sickening feeling for me. I remember also just feeling like so out of body, and I was feeling like, so basically they pulled baby out, and that feeling was like very sickening as well. And obviously, like, as soon as I heard him crying, and I could see them like out of the corner of my eye taking baby to go check his vitals or whatever it was that they were doing. And I was so thankful that he was alive, because while we were doing the C-section, I was still kind of scared, like, what if he comes out and he's not alive? Like, what if he's not alive? And then once he was out, I started feeling just so crazy, just no control over my body, or just, like I said, very out of body. I started like convulsing, basically like shaking, which I guess is common. And they had my arms like out in a T with like weighted things on them, but I felt so cold, and I felt just like I was gonna die. Like, I really kind of thought I'm going to die. And all I could think was that my partner wouldn't know, like, if I was alive or if baby was alive or any of that. So that was like very, very emotional for me. And I kept saying, like, I kept saying things the whole time, like, I can feel that. Am I supposed to feel that? I'm so cold, I'm so cold. And nobody was responding to me. So that was also really freaky. Um, my mom was right there next to me, so I kept telling her, like, put your hands on my face, like, put your hands on my arms, on my hands, like, because I just felt so cold, and I thought I'm gonna like slip away if I don't have like some kind of warmth. And needless to say, it was very horrifying and very traumatic. So after they were finished performing everything on him, my mom actually brought him over to me, and I wasn't able to do skin to skin because they were literally sewing up my stomach. So all I could really do was like face to face, and I gave baby boy like some kisses on the face and everything. I think pretty much every single thing on my birth plan didn't end up happening. The only thing that might have been was like some delayed cord clamping or something like that. So that was unfortunate. My birth plan was completely thrown out the window. And so after that, we were brought to a area for like postpartum, like an in-between area before they would take me to the recovery floor for C-sections. So there I was able to finally do skin to skin. I was able to try to breastfeed for the first time and all of that. Finally got some water and I think like some Jello or something. And it wasn't until 4 in the morning that we were checked into the recovery room. So baby boy arrived at 12:27 p.m. And it was so funny because they were playing like rock music the whole time. So when he was born, they were playing rock music, which I thought was really funny. My partner and I like both love rock music. And so it wasn't until 4 that I was checked into the room for recovery from C-section. And I was so out of it by this point with all the drugs and everything. So the nurse was having me kind of do some breastfeeding, and she was like checking his blood sugar and stuff like that. But at the time I thought that that was just normal. My mom fell asleep. I don't think I got any sleep that night, with the nurse coming in like every 30 minutes to an hour to check his blood sugar and all of that. And so at 8 a.m. the next morning, the new nurses that were on shift actually came and told me that he had tested low blood sugar like 3 times. So I was really kind of shocked at this point, because like I said, I was so out of it that I really didn't know what was going on. And they said that he would have to be taken down to the NICU, where they would try to get his blood sugar levels to like a normal level. So at that point, I completely lost it. Like I just started bawling because every pregnancy related fear I have ever had, literally being basically dumped while pregnant, not being able to go into labor naturally and having to have a C-section, having his heartbeat drop so many times, and then to be told that he was going to be taken to the NICU, like at that point it was just too much for me. So I like completely had like an emotional breakdown, but then I had to quickly get myself together. I called down to the NICU to see like how often can I go down there to see him. Like I'm trying to breastfeed, I want to exclusively breastfeed, so how often can I go down there to do that? And they said I could come down every 3 hours, morning and night. So as soon as I was cleared medically, I went down there for my first shift of seeing baby boy. And when I got down there, they had like this counselor to talk to me, because I guess they must have seen on my records that I was like a single mom. Like it seemed like every single nurse knew about that situation with my partner, and also because I had like lost it and was completely crying and everything. So there was a counselor there when I got down there asking me all these questions, which made me cry all over again. There were also these 2 pediatricians there, and they basically were kind of telling me, you know, if your milk doesn't come in, which there's a good chance it won't, you should really consider donor milk or formula. And so I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, it just felt like such an ambush. And I had actually been collecting my colostrum since 37 weeks pregnant. So I had, I think, like 35 syringes of my colostrum, thank God. So I told the doctors, like, no, I have 37 syringes of colostrum. I know how to hand express my colostrum. I'm here right now to breastfeed. I'll come down here every 3 hours. I'll pump in between. I'll do whatever I have to do because I want to breastfeed. I want to exclusively breastfeed. That's my plan. And if I'm not able to come down here to do that, then that's not going to happen for me. And so the doctors basically left, and the nurse that was there, she was like a complete angel, the nurse who took care of Sage like the entire time basically. And she said, you know, don't listen to them, like they really shouldn't have said that. You're being like just hit with so much information right now. What you should do is just try to focus on trying to breastfeed baby right now, and we'll just go from there. We'll see what happens and we'll evaluate as we go, but don't worry, because she knew that, you know, they were putting like way too much stress on me at that point, especially like I was so loopy from the drugs and everything, and it just was like my wishes weren't really being like respected, but she respected them, and so I was so appreciative for that. So I was able to do skin to skin. I was able to breastfeed baby. They used my syringes, but basically after like a day and a half, they had used all the syringes, and I had a pack of 50, and I so wish that I had collected all 50 syringes, because that would have lasted me probably at least until like 2 full days or something like that. So I definitely recommend collecting your colostrum. It's always just a good backup plan, especially for situations like this if the baby ends up in the NICU, because that colostrum is so important, and it only comes out for like the first 3 to 5 days or something, and then your milk is supposed to come in, but that colostrum has like so many benefits in it. So anyway, basically in between me going down there, I would pump milk, and I would collect more in syringes and send it down to them for any feedings in between the 3-hour time intervals. I had to be taken down there in a wheelchair every time I went down there. The only time I didn't go down was for the 2 a.m. and the 5 a.m. feeding, so that I could try to get some sleep, but I would still wake up at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. to pump, and then have a nurse go down with that breast milk for him. So in between that, trying to eat my meals, being given drugs, being checked for this and that, and people coming in for a birth certificate, and the pediatrician coming in, and all these doctors coming in, just between all of that, I literally did not even have time to like brush my hair, brush my teeth, nothing. Like, it was insane. I was literally in so much pain. I could barely get in and out of bed. And I was so sleep deprived, but I was also just like on a mission to get down there, give baby as much breast milk as possible. My breast milk did end up finally coming in, like probably day 2, day 3, something like that. And I was just adamant that I wanted to get him as much as possible, because I just thought to myself, like, the more I give him, the healthier he becomes, like the sooner he gets out of there. So I ended up being at the hospital for an entire week. He ended up being in the NICU for, I think, 3.5 days. Basically, day 4 is when they finally discharged him. I thought he was going to come out sooner. It seemed like that, but then they wanted to keep him in longer because they were also like testing a petri dish from the meconium or something like that, because they wanted to see if he'd gotten the meconium in his lungs and all of that kind of thing. So he was finally medically cleared, and that nurse was just, she was so sweet and just told me, like, you are literally an amazing mom. Like, what you've done is amazing. Like, you're just going to be such a great mom. And like, she just gave me some really great encouragement that like I really needed to hear at that moment. So she was like an angel. I had so many other great nurses as well who were just like really supportive. And but the last day when we checked out, we hadn't planned on checking out until the next morning, but that nurse was the worst nurse of all, and she basically kind of scared me into checking out that evening because she said, you know, like, you guys have passed everything at this point, but you're gonna have to go through all of it again tomorrow if you don't leave tonight. So we had like all this checkout process that we had to do. And then basically she didn't give me my medication at 6 p.m. like I was supposed to have gotten. So I was in a lot of pain, and we were supposed to go to the pharmacy to get my medication, but our pharmacy was closed for the day, which we hadn't realized with all the hustle and bustle that had been going on that day. So I literally had to walk all the way back up to the 4th floor. By that point, I had kind of been able to start walking a little bit. And I basically told the nurses there, you know, like, I was kind of pushed into checking out. I didn't know that my pharmacy was going to be closed. I'm not going to be able to make it through the night without my medication. And that nurse was there, and she basically like rolled her eyes at me. She was just awful. And she'd been really rude to my mom and I the entire time like that we had her as our nurse. And so anyway, they were able to transfer medication to a 24-hour Walgreens. But when we got there, the line of cars was so long. So my mom said, just go in. And that line was long as well. I could like barely stand at that point. I was in so much pain. My milk was like coming out, and I had nothing to, like, no like breast pads or anything. So I just had like these big rings of wetness like around my nipples. People were staring at me. It was so embarrassing. This guy actually came up to me and he was like, hey, were you at the 4th floor postpartum? And basically like his wife was there as well. So he recognized me and he was really nice and gave me like some words of encouragement. So basically I had not been discharged properly. The whole thing was such a mess. Got home that night, and honestly, I was just, the whole thing was so traumatizing for me, and I was in shock, I would say. The first couple of days with baby boy were really hard. I definitely had the baby blues. I think what made it just so bad was the exhaustion. I'd gotten really no sleep that entire week. I was getting no sleep with a newborn in between all of his like cluster feeding and everything. So I was so sleep deprived. The first couple days were really, really hard. But we are now going to be 3 weeks old tomorrow. Things have gotten a lot better. We're into a much better routine and everything, but I'm not gonna lie, having a baby is very hard, and doing it alone without having a partner is even harder. And that was also part of why my baby blues were so bad. Just the whole situation going on like with my partner and everything has just been very hard on me. Thankfully, I'm doing better now, and I'm just very thankful that things weren't any worse. That baby and I are safe and healthy, and he is literally just the cutest little thing. So I know things are going to get a lot easier as time goes on and everything, and I've always wanted to be a mom, so I'm very thankful to be a mama to Sage Wilder. Okay guys, this video is so long already, so I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of try to cut it off here. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully it's informative for any of you like first-time moms out there who are wondering what having a hospital birth is like. So I also forgot to mention, I need to mention this very quickly, that basically the reason that he had low blood sugar was because of that shot that they gave me twice to stop contractions, which leads to, usually results in the babies having low blood sugar, which I had no idea. They did not tell me that beforehand. So I'm pretty sure that's exactly what gave him the low blood sugar, because other than that, he was just perfectly healthy. So I just want you guys to know, to be informed about that, and hopefully the other elements of my birth story are informative as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Also check out my birth vlog if you haven't already. And I will see you guys in my upcoming videos. Please subscribe, and please also be sure to check me out on all socials at The Urban Darling and my blog, theurbandarling.com. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.